we are all talking about the education factor and good governance, but what is the weight also of economic growth on the GDP?
Are you saying to what degree does economics determine the political decision
No,
to do this? Or
determine also the low birth rate.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but it's the sequencing question, really, in a way, isn't it?
The chicken and egg question.
Yes, the chicken and egg, cart and horse issue.
Well,
Yeah. Next.
you know, I don't want to be misunderstood. I was giving examples. I wasn't giving prescriptions.
Right.
There is no
We need prescriptions.
Yeah, no, you don't, and that's the whole problem. We are always looking for prescriptions, and that's why we then say, well, this doesn't work because it didn't work there. We're looking for a process. We're looking for ways by which each society, each country, will determine what is appropriate for it. It's not going to be the same in Mali as it is in Kashmir or in Kerala or anywhere else. There are things like education, literacy, livelihoods, and a lot of other things, empowerment, being able to say no to power, which is your mother-in-law. I mean, these are all the things that you've got to do. And you've got to find out which, in each circumstance, culture and society, it works. So I'm giving you examples of things that work, for example, in central India, but may not work in eastern India. I have to figure out different ways that it's going to be. All I'm saying is that we didn't even bother to find out. It needs a certain amount of research. Each country will have to figure out where the pressure points are and what constitutes an effective strategy for least cost to make families feel that they've had enough when they've had one or two.
Right.
Now, this could be extremely easy in some places because it's part of the culture. It's extremely difficult. Now, as Malini says, you know, we have cultural problems in many parts of the world. India is no worse, no better than the 4 southern states of India, not Kerala alone, are actually developed country fertility rates. I mean, and they're from the same kind of culture. They have, except for Kerala, the others are male-dominated societies too. The basic thing, in fact, I remember a very dramatic instance. Barbara Pyle, the vice president of CNN, came to make a film about the women who work in our factory. And she took us to her home, and her mother-in-law was standing there.
Who, Barbara Pyle,
No.
of the women in your factory? Okay.
One woman in a factory was whose home we went to,
okay, yeah.
and Barbara Pyle had 2 cameras, and so she was looking at the woman and at her mother-in-law. So she asked, how many babies do you have? She had 1 daughter, and she was a young little thing. And so Barbara says to her, how many children do you want? She said, the young woman said, no more. And the other camera caught her mother-in-law picking up 4, then 5 fingers. So, I mean, you know, it depends partly on a variety of things. My answer to that is, yes, it's true that some things would take a certain amount of while, but in that particular case, the livelihood that she had, the earning power that she had, made a huge difference in her position in the family as well as in society. And she was able to say to her husband and to her mother-in-law, I'm sorry, I am an independent woman, I have enough money coming in, and I'm not going to be told how many kids I want.
Okay, let me just. Do you want to jump in at this stage? Yeah, and then I want to take a couple more questions.
Well, Chair, you said you thought that prescriptions were a good thing, and Ashok said he thought they weren't needed. What I'm absolutely missing.
What moderators end up with, that's good for the world. But anyway, go on. Yeah.
What I'm absolutely missing in this session is, first of all, working to the actual declared agenda, which was any fair global climate deal is likely to be based on some principle of contraction and convergence, and then it describes it. And to basically put a question to the gentleman from the World Food Programme, to Mr. Ed Girardet, to the lady from the Social Markets Foundation in India, and also to you, Nazir, and also to Ashok, and if you like, to Roger and yourself. By 2050, I mean, I'm going to lay this out very clearly for you. You can answer this question as a number, or you can answer this question as I don't know, or, but I advise you not to, you can answer this question, quote, quote, we don't need a number. Now, here's the question. And please, each one of you, answer 1, 2, or 3. Simple as that, just a little poll. By 2050, what concentration of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere would you regard as safe and stable, measured as parts per million by volume? And I'll suggest a couple of numbers, perhaps 350 parts per million, or perhaps 450, or perhaps 550. Over to you. Just very short answers from each of you on that point, and I'll note them down, because that's what I really want to comment on in relation to everything that's been laid.
Okay, 5 seconds each.
I'll say, as a journalist, I would say something, but I will say I don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
I don't know.
Don't know? Nazir?
No idea.
No idea? Malin?
Information that we have and the Hansen advocacy of 350.
Okay, 350. Any other hands up? Who wants
350.
350?
I'd say 270.
270.
Whoopie-doo. Okay.
So
Well,
the
let me...
consequence of that is...
Very simple. If you're going to achieve a concentration of 350 parts per million by volume for CO2 only, never mind the equivalent gases, which would make it a much bigger amount that we're having to deal with, you would need to take emissions from where they are now to zero within about the next 30 years and have to take them negative for a long period thereafter. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad idea. But what I am saying is that the amount of population growth that happens in that time seriously isn't going to have any relevance as to whether that is achieved.
It's one of two wedges.
No, it's absolutely not.
It's only a part of the deal.
No, let's absolutely...
Other things to do.
Ashok, with respect, you can love or loathe me for saying this, but this is not an opinion, this is an absolutely unavoidable logistical fact. In order to stabilize the atmosphere concentration of greenhouse gases at any value, whether it's at today's value or higher than today's value or going to higher and then coming to lower than today's value, you need, quote, quote, a full-term contraction, and I would say contraction and convergence event in its entirety. You have to take global emissions, that means all countries, to zero, and if it's 350, beyond, and potentially within the next 30 years. The wedges at that point don't begin to address the enormity of that crisis. So the real question that hangs over all of this is, what is given the enormous difficulty of weaning the global community off fossil fuel dependence, whether they're rich consumers or poor consumers and so on, given the enormous difficulty of doing that and the obvious absolute need to achieve that as soon as possible, but where as soon as possible is restricted by the amount of momentum that's in the wrong direction, what is the level that we think still, it may be too high, but is safe against the test of, quote, avoiding runaway rates of climate change? Runaway rates of climate change occur when you get to a certain level of greenhouse gas concentration, a certain level of extra radiative forcing of heat trapping of these gases, and the human emissions that come from forest burning and fossil fuel burning are actually matched by, equaled by, and potentially exceeded by all the additional emissions that are released as a result of the failure of the sinks, because the oceans warm up, they go acidic, they no longer act as a sink, because the forests burn and actually release CO2, the forest floors catch fire and release CO2, the collapse of that sink factor, and then further aggravated by the fact that the ice is going to melt, so what has been an albedo effect reflecting heat away turns to negative albedo where that heat is absorbed, and we are caught, no matter what we do, in runaway conditions of climate change. Believe me, the number of people that are going to experience the consequences of that, it may be very painful for every one of them, whether it's 6 or 12 billion. It's just a holocaust. So all I'm saying in response to everything that's been led here, I have absolutely no reason to disagree with anything that has been said by Roger or Ashok. All of those things make sense in their own right and should be absolutely pursued in their own right and on their own terms. They have merit. They will be obviously contested, but they're battles worth fighting. But the idea that that constitutes a global deal on climate change, frankly, is delusional. We have to achieve a full-term global contraction event, probably no more than within the the next 40 to 50 years max, if we have any prospect of then thereafter returning to 350 ppmv. And it's very, very dodgy.